Hello again and welcome back to In Between Sundays with me, Marco Arroyo. Before we get into the video, if you would consider liking the video, subscribing, and also supporting the Patreon, the link is in the description below. Today I'm doing a podcast with a preacher that I know by the name of Jack Wilkie. How should Christians engage in the culture that we live in today? How are we supposed to do that, and how far can we go when we do that? Neil McDonough and Alan Ritchson, both actors in action movies. Alan Ritchson plays Reacher in the Prime series of Reacher, a couple seasons they have out now. They both claim to be Christians, and they're also in Hollywood. So how does that work? Can that work? How much can it work? As Christians, how far into this world can we go before we become the world? And how do we engage this world? Should we be engaging at all? Me and Jack had a fascinating conversation. I'm hoping it'll bless your life too. Again, I appreciate your support always. Let's get into the conversation. We're about to watch a clip of an interview that Neil McDonough did, and then a clip of Alan Ritchson. These are two people in Hollywood, actors who also profess faith in Christ, and they have some limits to what they're willing to do, kind of, maybe, sort of.
You played this murderous, sadistic, very smooth but very sadistic killer, and if I may say so, you have one of the cruelest faces I've ever seen. And I was absolutely shocked when I started to read about you and find out that you are a Christian who refuses even to do kissing scenes on screen. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. And everyone, it was funny. It was Justified. That was kind of like my big comeback role, where I was fired from a show because I wouldn't do certain things, and everyone thought it's because I'm this religious zealot. And obviously I'm a very religious guy, but I just love my wife. I love my craft. I love working. But I love my wife and my family that much more. So I was never just comfortable with it. And there are plenty of guys who are. So, and my hat's off to you for doing it. But for me, it's just something that I was never very comfortable with.
He won't even do a kissing scene. That's a line that probably most people in Hollywood would not draw.
Right.
He just doesn't want to do that stuff anymore. I believe he doesn't even curse, if I'm not mistaken. But what's your reaction when you see someone in Hollywood talking about that? Is that good? Is that like, come on, too much? Just act. You can act. It's not you saying it. It's the character saying it. Where does Jack Wilkie think about all this?
I think that's great because it's been so weird. Like, you just kind of think through the logic of that. Well, I'm just pretending. Like, well, but you're still putting your lips on another man's wife, or it's not your wife. And I mean, 1 Corinthians 7 is pretty clear on your body belongs to your wife, so you're not out sharing it with somebody else. And so drawing that line, and as he said, he got fired for it, which it's Hollywood. It's not no surprise that they wouldn't put up with that, or that they would say, oh, okay, well, we can find a million other people who will go do that. But that is part of being a Christian in an industry like that, is you're going to navigate some things. And if you draw a hard line, expect, that it's not going to go well for you. You might deal with some financial setback or whatever. But again, if you're going to hold to your Christianity, or whatever stripe of religious he is, I think he's Catholic, I believe. But again, sometimes they put us to shame with values that they hold that they're very uncompromising. I really think they, for all the problems I have with Rome, they definitely have some people who really hold strong on certain things.
I wanted to say Randy Newman, but that's the singer. Paul Newman
Right.
is the
Paul
actor.
Newman, yeah.
That he said something like, regarding not doing kissing scenes with women. He said, "Why would I go out and have a cheeseburger if I have steak at home," or something like that. And what he's saying is it's not like a crude way to talk about his wife. What he's saying is, like, why would I go out and mix myself in with the culture and worldliness if I have a blessed and joyful life already, right? I have something that's way better than what that culture offers. Let's talk about now Alan Ritchson, someone who has gone further. Now, the title is Some Say I Can't Be a Christian and Play Reacher. He plays Jack Reacher in the series, a couple seasons now. If you haven't seen it, there is like profanity. There's like a lot of violence, and yeah, and so and there's even like nudity too. And so and nudity by him, by the way. He's going to make the point that, like, I'm playing someone that's so different from me, but his point goes a little bit deeper. He thinks that this is like morally good and right. And so I want to hear what your thoughts are after watching this.
I love playing Reacher. I love telling this story. I love playing a character who creates a kind of moral ambiguity that we should struggle against as we consider whether or not what he's doing is good all the time or morally right. I think that kind of thing is fun and fascinating, and I think escaping to that world as an audience, hopefully it's as enjoyable for you as it is for me to help bring it to life. But it's funny to me how a lot of people criticize me, supposed Christians especially, criticize me for playing Reacher, as if the only TV that should exist is seeing people silently folding their hands in the pew of a church. I mean, what kind of stories are we supposed to tell? If you look at Scripture, what do you find? You see 1,000 years of an infinitely holy God holding tension with human beings as he tells the story of who he is, reveals who he is through an imperfect people. So we get stories of paganism and a war and bloodshed and ghost stories, mysticism. We see miracles and magic, and we see life and resurrection and death. And we see this incredible canvas where God is completely unafraid to tell the story of who he is through less than morally ambiguous characters, through pure evil sometimes, you know? So I think it's laughable when people criticize me for playing characters that are not like saintly, you know? That's not my job, and I don't think God cares about only telling those kinds of stories. I think we can start conversations and we can reach people through these mediums in a way that I think God enjoys. And so here we are now, where we can get to the heart of the matter, where God has built a platform because of the show for me where I can reach people who maybe don't think about these things all the time. And maybe for those who are struggling or feel lost or want to try something new, they can find something that brings them hope, like My Faith Has Mine. Now, God created the heaven and the earth, the heavens and the earth. We see that God is a creator. But what kind of creator? We go to verse 2 to find out. It says, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters representing chaos. The earth formless and empty." The Hebrew word for formless and empty is tovu vavohu. It means wild and waste. There was nothing but wild and waste in the beginning. We sort of skip over the Big Bang and we've got the planets forming and coalescing, but it's wild and waste. There's no good there yet. There's nothing usable. It's empty. And God's Spirit is hovering over the waters. And out of that, he creates a garden that is enviable among angels and man, the Garden of Eden. He creates humanity. He begins this saga that is epic, an epic saga of love out of the wild and the waste. And I think that is exactly what God intended in the first two verses of the Bible to be revealed, that he is a good creator, and that out of the wild, the waste, and the empty of your life, he can create a garden if you let him. But the difficulty is the fact that when God wills himself over creation and says, out of this wild and waste, just with my breath, I will animate goodness and gardens and sunsets and sunrises and humanity that will learn slowly how to love each other. When it comes to people, he's a little standoffish because he doesn't want to breach free will, because he wants to respect the fact and see what you do with this opportunity to invite the Spirit in that hovers over you, or to try to do it on your own and stay in the wild and the waste and be the king and Lord over the emptiness. Would you rather be the king and the God of the emptiness and the wild and the waste, or would you rather participate under one who is the infinite, holy, good creator of all, in his garden, participate in that garden? That is the question that we face in the first two verses of the Bible. That is the heart of the matter. And when we are distracted with other questions of like, can you possibly be a Christian and play a character like Reacher? We're missing that moment, that confrontation that God is waiting for in all of our lives. And for some of us, it comes sooner than others.
Well, what do you think about that?
So, you've got Paul saying we need to become all things to all men in order to reach some, but that's not limitless. That's not, you can do whatever. You can't go march in the pride parade to reach people or whatever. And in the same sense where he's saying, well, I can do all these things, or essentially play at sin, on TV and show things that shouldn't be shown, say things that shouldn't be said, because that opens the door for the gospel. Where does holiness fit in with that? And where is separation from that? And he's taking it as you can go do that, and so you're among those people, and now they're like, oh, okay, well, you've come all the way over here. Now I'll listen to you about religion. And the verse that came to mind for me was 1 Peter 4:3. For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In all this, they are surprised that you do not run with them into the same excess of dissipation, and they malign you. But they will give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. They're not surprised that, oh, wow, Christians are coming to hang out with us. They're surprised that Christians don't do that anymore, that Christians have given that lifestyle up. And he seems to take it as a badge of honor that people are surprised that, oh, well, you're a Christian, but you'll come compromise with us. And so between him and McDonough, and interestingly, as I was researching McDonough, I appreciate his approach, that, the video we watched more, but he was on a show, Desperate Housewives, which was, all kinds of soft porn. Really a bad show. and he was talking about how they worked around that he wouldn't kiss women other than his wife. That even on a show like that, a show about adultery and fornication and all this other stuff, well, at least he held his principles there. And it's like holding good principles while putting something on TV that's really, really objectionable. I mean, like that, and so on the other hand, you've got the monastic will pull away from the world, only make Christian, God's not dead, facing the giants, fireproof kind of movies. Which, let's be honest, they're not, it's not the greatest cinema out there. I don't think that's where, we have to pull away and just have our own cloistered thing. On the other hand, just running in and say, hey, we can do whatever the world does, nudity, profanity, whatever, kissing, somebody other than your wife, sex scenes, whatever it may be. And that's going to be how we reach them. Well, that's not good either. Go in there with your Christian morals and say, well, if you'll have me and I can still do this and we can put on something that I can let my family watch, okay. I think there's now, unfortunately, again, as you see, Hollywood's not real tolerant toward that, but I don't know. I think it's somewhere in the middle between the two, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, the world's got James Cameron. We've got Kirk. We got Kirk Cameron. That's
Right.
that's the only director we need.
There you go.
Now, this might be a little dicey territory. Do you remember, and we might even cut this out, but do you remember that whole, what's the word, like hubbub? I don't know if that's a word, but that whole thing that happened with the nude paintings or the nude drawings of Freed Hardeman?
Yes. Yeah.
And there was this whole debate about that with like, okay, it is art, right? And I remember, I think David Shannon went and said, like, look, it's like depicting the human form, right? And this is like, we're separating it from that. And so, though these students are looking at nude bodies, and they're not doctors, they're not training to be doctors. This is like one of those situations where it's not the same thing. That's kind of that was the way I remember the art. That was like 2017 probably. That was years ago, but it seems that his argument is relatively similar to how I remember the argument from people who were okay with it at Freed Hardeman, that like this is artistic expression, and there are different rules for artistic expression than there are in just like what I would say as myself. I don't like what he did with the Bible. He goes, in the Bible, there are stories of people doing horrible things. And so therefore I can depict horrible, like I heard someone say, someone has to play Judas in the church play. If you did a play, like someone has to play Judas in The Passion of the Christ, for example, which is a movie that I appreciate. That's not the same thing. That is not the same thing. If I was an actor and someone said play Judas, and now you have to kiss this woman and cuss a whole lot and curse the name of God all throughout the movie, I'd say, well, I'm not going to play Judas, right?
Right.
There are lines that are being crossed. Like I said, he's done like intimate scenes with no clothes on before. And from what when I was looking into that more, I read that there's nothing like that in this newest season, so maybe he changed from season 1 to season 2 to give him some credit. But I don't agree with the idea that if I kind of mix in a little bit and show people in the world that I'm cool, show people in the world that I'm not a prude, like you said, the only movies out there shouldn't be us silently folding our hands in a church pew. That's not the dichotomy, right? That's not the dichotomy. So he's starting from this false idea. But in my experience, if I show people in the world that I'm cool like them and mix in like them, I don't think that gives me any credibility or credit, like extra credit at all. I think that if I were to mix in, it would just take away from he's supposed to be a Christian, and I thought Christians were supposed to be different. There still is that expectation in the world. Now, what do you think?
Not that we're selling the gospel, but there is the concept of devaluing the product. If this is not different, it's not better, it's exactly the same as what you got, then what are they going to say? Then why do I need it? I'm doing just fine right here. If they can look and see, wow, this what I just read there in First Peter, they're surprised that you don't join in with them. Like if they're looking like, man, that person's different, that's going to make them uncomfortable, and that'll go one of two ways. Like, okay, there's a light there, and I'm drawn to the light, or there's a light, and they love, the Bible says they love the darkness. Some people are going to love the darkness, and they don't like seeing something different. But if you, dim your light, as everything Jesus talks about there in Matthew 5, to try and, while the light's a little blinding to people, that's a little much, and so I'm going to like try and maybe cover it or turn the wattage down a little bit so they're a little more comfortable. they're not gonna be able to see. I mean,
Yeah.
there does have to be this separation. Again, holiness and something different.
Yeah, because what Christ offers the life of a Christian is objectively and always going to be better. It's like if someone said, my favorite food in the world for the taste, the whole experience is Kraft macaroni and cheese. And then you tell them like, all right, I've got this recipe. It's going to take you 7 hours. You've got to buy 30 different ingredients and you got to put all this together in just the right way. And if you do it all in just the right way, then it will taste exactly like Kraft macaroni and cheese. They're going to go, well, why would I
Right.
do that? All that extra
Right.
work, all those extra steps. And it's
Yep.
just like this. If the way Marco lives is just like the way whatever person lives, and if my values are their values, and it's like, why would I even look for Jesus at all?
Well, the other thing is he kind of set up a false dichotomy of, and he didn't say this directly, but a lot of people that talk this way, this is the way what they get at is, well, I'm not going to be holier than thou. You know, I'm not going to the world saying I'm better than you. Like that's not what we're saying either. It's
Yeah.
such were some of you. You know,
Yeah,
First
yeah.
Corinthians 6 of like I used to be that, now I'm not anymore. Not because I'm better than you, because of Christ. Like if you're the same as them, you're going to point to Christ and be like, yeah, he doesn't really have any power or control over my life. He doesn't change anything. He just makes me feel better inside. Somebody who doesn't already feel bad inside is going to be like, well, good for you. I'm glad it worked. Which is what you see a lot of times is as long as you don't force your Christianity on somebody, if it works for you, that's fine. Like, okay, but it's
Yeah.
still true. He's still Lord. He's like, they still need him.
I wish more non-Christians knew about Christians, and some Christians have given this wrong impression, but I wish that more non-Christians knew that the reason why I stay away from these sins, whatever they are, the reason why I fight so hard every day to be what God wants me to be, is not because I think I'm better than you. It's because Jesus saved me from that. I've been saved from that life and from the guilt of that, and I don't want to go back to that. It's not like I think I'm too good for it. It's not like it's not who we are at all. I'm a person, and this is actually, it's not arrogance at all. People view this as arrogance. This is as humble as it can get, which is I have been rescued from that, and I can't go back to that. That's the very last thing I want in this life is for me to give myself back to that stuff. I don't think I'm better than you. In fact, I recognize that in this sense, I'm just like you. I have a problem with sin, and maybe they don't recognize that, but I have a problem with sin. I'm in desperate need of God's grace, and I cannot let myself go back to that. I have to fight and do everything I can to stay away. And with that in mind, when I let myself get mixed in with the sinful parts of our culture, I'm just selling everything that Jesus did on the cross short.
This is something I borrowed from a Chinese writer named Watchman Nee, that Jesus on the cross died to save us from our sins, and he came out of the grave to save us from our sin. And a lot of people want to have their sins washed away, you know, the thing that you're going to be punished for, but he also saves you from your sin, the problem you have, your desires, the going along with sin. And people like this want to be saved from their sins, but not sin. Like they want to continue kind of holding hands with sin. And it's like, no, you need to be saved from that. It's good to everything you were just saying there. The other thing, I'll give people a caution here: be really careful where you get your theology. I would bet really good money if I were a gambling man, which I'm not, and that's a whole other subject, but that guy watches a really popular YouTube channel that has a lot of theological cartoons, that has millions of viewers. I'm not going to name it because people get mad when I do, but he was saying all the terminology that they use in their videos, and it's really bad theology. I think they're messing people. I'll just say it's the Bible Project. I think they're leading a lot of people astray for this kind of Christianity that is compromised, that views the Bible kind of from the wrong way. The way he was using those Bible stories is, oh, all these broken people. And it's like, yeah, that was bad. Jesus came to save us from the brokenness,
Yeah.
not, just be like, yeah, just keep doing that. And so again, you got to be really careful at the kind of things you're listening to, because you end up in places like this saying, well, I can go be nude on screen. And what do you say? God enjoys that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he does.
It's kind of similar to I saw this old meme that from an atheist page that said like, in the Bible, you say the Bible's this awesome book. Well, there are like 1,000 and whatever lies. There are whatever accounts of like a murder. There's blah, blah, blah. And like, what's funny about that is God calls all those things sin.
Right.
The Bible
right.
is recording history, not promoting everything that's happened throughout the course of history. And that's
Yep.
a huge distinction. It's such
Big
a
difference.
crazy distinction. Before we get out of here, I know you said you just shared a couple thoughts. By the way, Watchman Nee.
Yeah, he's like I said, Chinese guy from about
What a
100 years
name.
ago. Yeah, some brilliant books, some really
Wow.
good stuff.
Okay, I'll check that out. I heard Watchman Nee, and it almost made me laugh. It sounds like a fake name. Your first name
It
is
does.
Watchman?
It does, yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those,
crazy.
like, they gave him a nickname. I wouldn't be able to pronounce his real name anyway, so it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's pretty handy.
Oh, okay, so it's a nickname. I was like, okay, I know we 100 years ago, but today we name our kids strange stuff. I think
That's
I met
true.
a kid named Pebble recently or something like that. But
You might meet a Watchman someday, yeah.
yeah.
Everything we've talked about is going right back to where I started. Christ is Lord over everything you do, over your entertainment, over culture, over all these other things. He's not Lord for 2 hours on Sunday, and we got to live like he's Lord for the whole thing.
Yeah, he's Lord over who you are in every single way, and that's reflected in your job and what you should be willing to compromise in your job, in your friendships, in every single sense. Thank you so much, man, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I owe you some cheap Tex-Mex next time you're over
There you
here.
go. Next time I come through, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Again, check out Focus Press, everything that Jack does. You have a Substack too, right?
Yeah, churchreset.substack.com.
Okay. Anything else? Focus Press, Substack.
Think Deeper podcast.
Think Deeper
the other big
podcast.
one.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. I definitely enjoy and appreciate that stuff a lot. But again, man, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope that conversation was a blessing to you. I love you so much. Again, I'm glad you're here. Consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. Leave me a comment. Tell me what your thoughts are on all of this. And also support the Patreon if you can and are able to do that. If you want to do that, I really would appreciate your support in that. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.